Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Movement Made Better podcast. Today, our guests are Dan Duran and Israel Ale. Thanks, gentlemen, for joining us today. Thank you for being on our podcast. Dan, we'll start with you. Give yourself a little intro to the listeners.
I'll try to make it really quick here. My name's Dan, and I've been with PTA Global as an employee for 5.5 years, as a contractor employee, or going back about 8 years, and as a fan since it started. I was very fortunate to get to be mentored by a very good friend of mine, Rodney Korn, who was a co-founder of the company and was the CEO or COO when I was hired in 2015. In a nutshell, my background is actually primarily training. So I spent a career with the state of California, worked for them for 22 years, primarily law enforcement, where I ended up being an academy director and running statewide training for all of our officers. So training is my passion, and the topics I primarily focused on were anything, what we call the manipulative skills, anything that had to do with movement, use of force, etc. I was just lucky to fall into this and be surrounded by great people that do a great job. And here I am, very blessed and lucky to be a part of the company.
Fantastic. Israel?
So I've been in the industry, I don't know, close to 20 years now. I started as a personal trainer. I did that until I figured out what I wanted to do. Like a lot of trainers, figured out I could actually make some money off it. And I kind of fell in love with the business. I fell in love with what we do day in, day out. I fell in love with the struggle. And so then, my main mission was to try to figure out how to make money out of this. So then I had kind of a personal mission of, I want to be a trainer that makes six figures. And so did that, but put in about 70 hours a week and realized that, man, I got a baby on the way and can't do this forever. So my mission changed to, I want to teach trainers how to do this. I want to teach trainers how to make six. And so had a lot of success in doing that in the kind of the corporate world with the large club chain. Moved up the ranks to fitness manager, general manager running clubs, and then overseeing fitness division for several clubs at this corporation. And all the while focused on, the systems and processes of really how to match the passion with the paycheck for personal trainers, right? And feel good about doing it. I would say from there, I kind of was a fan of PTA Global before I was employed by PTA Global. So I actually helped select this content to drive a big piece of the education and onboarding platform for about 450 stores in this corporation. The corporation was 24 Hour Fitness. And so what I realized is that although the education was really good, it lacked application. It lacked development around the tools and the skills. And so, of course, it didn't grow legs like we thought it was going to at the company. And so again, fast forward a couple of years, I hopped around a couple of jobs and came in contact with Dan and got the privilege and opportunity to be able to actually join a company that I was a huge fan of for many years, kind of spearheading their education. And I'd say a big focus of connecting the education with application, specifically for the trainers, teaching them, okay, well, how do I make money off this? And I think that was a big part of why Dan brought me on board is I spoke the language of the clubs. I spoke the language of the trainer. And so I think, not the smartest guy in the room for sure, but I was a guy that, could speak to the people, so to speak, and help kind of connect the dots. That's a little bit longer than Dan's version, but there's a peek under the hood.
No worries. What are some distinctions that separate PTA Global from some of the other organizations out there?
Great question, Dennis. First and foremost, there are a lot of great organizations out there, and you'll never hear anybody from our company say that we're better or anybody is inferior. That said, how we're different is our education, thanks to the co-founders and to the folks that had the vision to see, what's missing in the industry. We tend to focus on behavior. We tend to focus on communication, building strong relationships, building trust, really understanding how the mind works and, how to leverage not only the science of psychology, neuropsychology, et cetera, but just the human nature of what obstacles the people we're trying to work with actually put in front of themselves and how we can help them become more aware of that. Because training the body, I'm not going to say it's easy. I don't think any of us would say it's easy, but it's science. And all of the certifications, the gold standard certifications do a great job explaining how to train the body. But it's the person inside the body. It's from the neck up that becomes our biggest challenge. And we set out on a mission, the co-founders did, when it was created, to really crack the code on being able to communicate with people and build that strong relationship from the neck up so that they could achieve what it was they wanted to achieve. And I'll just kind of add just a little bit more, and that is that the other thing that we did and do differently is we look at the body as more of a unit, more of a functional anatomy. So, for example, the myofascial lines by Dr. Thomas Myers. So we teach, isolated anatomy, physiology, joints, muscles, etc. But we also take a look at how the body moves as a unit so that we can not only, take a visual type of quote unquote assessment, but, take a look at how somebody's moving. But more importantly, making sure that we're loading and training and moving in all three planes of movement and incorporating the lines, which is the myofascial lines, was actually where we derive our foundation from. It's not from a individual muscle or two muscles. And the last piece that we do different, kind of a long answer, but I'm quite proud of it, is the business piece. And that is, how do we build a business? And unfortunately, I think I certainly was guilty of not thinking of personal training as a business. I thought it was a job, and then it became a career, but didn't really understand that it was a business right from the get-go. But it truly, truly is. It's a business within a business within a business. And so we have a lot of education on how you build that business, how you prospect for clients, how you build, utilize marketing techniques, social media techniques, to be able to build it and then measure it and find out where is it that I can improve this business to take it to the next level.
And really, that's such a key missing component that a lot of other organizations are not including, is really to teach the trainer / coach not only the X's and O's of how to deal with the body, but really surviving the business side of everything.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's, Israel says he's not the smartest guy in the room. I think I challenge that, but I will say this, he's the hardest working guy in the room. And what he indeed brought to PTA Global that we needed was that hands-on in the trenches, working with literally hundreds of thousands of trainers trying to build their business. So I would actually defer to him to talk more about, how we've done a good job with that and how he's been able to integrate it and see it work.
So Israel, is on the business side, are trainers really locked into that when they come into it as this is something they really want to get an edge on? Or is that something you kind of find that you're kind of maybe force feeding to people?
Yeah, great question, man. So I think of it in kind of two lenses. One, a lot of trainers don't know what they don't. Yeah. And so a lot of trainers, just because maybe a lot of their friends are starving artists, they just think it's kind of part of a badge of honor that they wear. It's like, hey, man, this profession, you don't make a lot of money, you really do it for the people. Yeah. And that's just the belief drives the behavior. So their belief just seems, well, no one really makes a lot of money doing this. And so I think that's a big part of, we're trying to change the game. The best analogy I can think of is there's a lot of trainers out there using the wrong tool when they step up to the plate. Like, you're a hockey guy, right?
Yep.
And so, hockey's great for hockey, but you probably wouldn't step up to the plate to play a baseball game with a hockey stick, right? Or a wiffle ball bat or a golf club. So a lot of trainers I think are trying to find the right tool, and they're stepping up to the plate, and then eventually they stop stepping up to the plate because they have so many swings and misses that they start to think that, okay, well, the game isn't winnable. But the entire time they've just been using the wrong tool. And so I think for PTA Global, we're trying to give them that Louisville Slugger. We're trying to give them a series of tools and systems that have reproducible outcomes. So that way, when they do step into the plate, they make contact over and over and over again. And I think that's how we change the game in our industry too, right? We have an 80% attrition rate. 8 out of 10 personal trainers will leave in their first year. And we know that's not because they don't have enough tools under their tool belt. It's because they're not using the right tools in the right way. And candidly, they can't make a living doing what they love. And so I think a big part of my passion for joining PTA Global is to change that language.
Because I think what I found over the years is people are really surprised when you tell them that this is your career and this is your full-time job. I think we've gotten that questions a lot of times where people are like, oh, what else do you do? And so that's kind of what we're trying to fix, is that ability to say, we can make this a career and sustain it so that you're not dropping out at an 80% attrition rate. What we're finding today is most things are usually talking about driving business towards you, right? But then when you get that business, what are you doing with it? Like, how are you sustaining it? How are you growing it? So that you're not always basically cold calling and trying to sell yourself all the time, right?
Yeah. And we have an entire section dedicated to that, and it's retention. It's client retention. I think that's, to your point, Dennis, largely overlooked. We know that it takes a lot more time and effort, which translates into money, to acquire a new client than it does to retain a client. Mm-hmm. So, we have 10 keys to client retention. We show you how to use our tools that Israel was talking about, our program design questionnaire, our Kaizen 6, decisional balance sheet, some of the tools that we use that you pull out of your tool belt periodically to make sure you're delivering exactly what it is they're looking for, but also thinking outside the box. For example, common thought is, I think I'm going to reward my client for doing this or that, or doing a great job or Christmas or whatever it may be with a PT session. We're kind of devaluing that session when we do that. We need to be thinking outside the box. So a gift card for dinner for their family, to see a sporting event that their son or daughter is passionate about. We need to connect with the people outside of the gym and become a part of their entire life, not just their 1 hour in the gym 2 to 3 times a week. Truly become an ally and look at it that way. And I'm going to add, just personally, that was a game changer for me, because I came into this industry with a different philosophy of don't get close to people, don't let people know about you, etc. Don't wear a wedding ring, so they don't, just weird things that come along with law enforcement. It took somebody teaching me at the age of 40, that, hey, it's okay to put your guard down and actually hug people and care about them, care about their kids, remember their birthdays, remember their anniversaries, and reward them for frequency, recency, and total monetary value, which is exactly what we teach, that Bobby contributed to our keys to client retention. Be a life resource for them. And that's a game changer. It's an absolute game changer. Make sure you're delivering the service they ask for and become a part of their life. So
because you're taking is showing that you're taking a vested interest in other aspects that they enjoy.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Ultimately when we interview somebody, and we know this, we call it peeling the onion, but we do an interview to determine what their goals are, right? Maybe their timeframes. But when we truly peel that thing down, we're going to get to the real why, which we've all heard of. But when you get to the why, there's always other people involved. It's not just about them. And it always ends with this word, happy. It always ends with the word happy, no matter what. You keep digging and digging, and you're going to hear that word. So what is it, and who are the people involved, and who are the people affected when you're happy? And make sure that you're touching and being a part of that relationship, because that's going to take it far beyond the brick and mortar walls or the outdoor workout or whatever you want to call it, so that you're tapping truly into their why, because their why is outside that gym, 100% outside that gym.
Yeah, because that's basically what they're coming to the gym and training for, is to be able to deal with what's outside the gym, right?
Exactly. And it's knowing that and remembering that. I think that's where we fall short. We'll do an interview, we'll learn about somebody, and by the next week, you've forgotten. It's back to treating everybody the same. And the goal is to lift more weight. The goal is to do more push-ups, whatever it may be. Guilty. They made that mistake, even with training my wife. And that was the last time I trained her as a trainer. And I already knew this stuff, and I still messed it up because I transferred my goal to her. And you absolutely have to remind yourself, review, and truly understand what is motivating that person and who else is affected by it, and make sure you're tying into that. That's what we call creating an experience rather than creating a workout.
Yeah, I think sometimes trainers, fall into that, hey, I'm doing this right now, so this is really cool, I'm going to have my client do this. And then they get stuck in that, hey, we're going to chase this goal, you're going to hit this number. But in reality, that doesn't really help their client.
No, you nailed it. And the last thing I'll add to that is not only circling back to their why, but their words. The words they use when you interview them and subsequently speak to them, it's speaking, using those words back to them, so that they, A, know that you listened, and B, now you're speaking their language, not mine. So if somebody says, I want to tone up here, and they rub their belly, I don't say you want to define your rectus abdominis. Like, no, that's not what I said. That's not what I said. I never said that. What I say is, okay, we're going to work on toning up here today. Now I'm using your body language, your words, mirroring and matching exactly what you said to me, which not only do they receive much better, but they know I'm paying attention and I care. I'm treating them as an individual.
So how big of a percentage is the business part of course? Like, is it
Ooh, that's
30-40% of it? Or, I mean,
I'd have to go. That's a really good question. I'd have to go in and look at hours and add them up. But when I think of business, we're talking about orientation. We're talking about a good interview, program design interview, prospecting on the fitness floor, meeting people, connecting with people, and the actual business part of KPIs, tracking, how many people you've reached out to, talked to, what your booking rate is, what your closing rate is, et cetera. All of that, I think of that as the business. And I'm just going to throw a number out because I don't have a spreadsheet open. Now I feel really bad because I'm a spreadsheet guy. I know Israel loves that about me. But I would say probably if you put all that together, I'd say a good 25% of our content is business because it's all tied into the business.
Well, I know personally, I think that's something that I really wish all programs had, because I've told Neil countless times. I think one of the biggest things that was missing when I got into this industry is the business side of it. And when I talk business, I'm not talking about just marketing and bringing people into your company, into your clientele base. I'm talking about how to manage them once they get them. And because taxes and all these other things that we kind of just, we just don't know how to manage it. We just want to train. That's all we want to do. But if we don't have the other stuff, it's like Israel said, we're going to find ourselves out in the cold within a year or 2 years. So that's one of those things we want to really lock down. Dan, really quickly, you said you trained your wife. Would you recommend to any new burgeoning trainer or coach out there, would you recommend training your significant other?
Oh, come on now. You're putting me on the spot here, man.
No, I'm not. No, I'm just saying generically. I'm not saying you specifically. If you had to give that piece of advice, would you say yes or no?
I would say it's definitely worth a try. Okay. Because we always want to be supportive and of each other in anything that we endeavor, but realize that it may not go as planned. In my case, the mistake I made was she told me she wanted to lose weight, and that was her goal. And her movement style, we have what we call movement styles, understanding how people like to move or is it a traditional, more one-dimensional type of, 3 sets of 8, 4 sets of 8, repeat the workout every Monday? Or are you progressive? And that is, give me something different every single set, every single week. Surprise me, hide the workout in the fun. She's progressive. She wants to lose weight. I'm training her traditionally and having her do her 3rd set of push-ups and saying, hey, I'm barking at her saying, I think I said something like, in 2 more weeks, you're going to be able to do 20 push-ups. And that's when her head spun completely around 360 degrees and her voice changed. And she said, I never said I wanted to do 20 push-ups. I said I wanted to lose weight. And she fired me. So if you're going to go down that road, use all of the tools, do as I say, not as I do, right? Use those tools and truly listen and tie that right back in, just like I already said, right back into their why, right back into their goal. Make sure they're delivering what they want. Don't think that because they're a family member, you can move them outside of a box and they're going to do what you tell them to do because they're a family member. Still use the same tools that we teach at PTA Global. Absolutely, give it a try.
Israel, anything to add on to that?
To bolt onto that, I would not advise doing that.
Okay.
I made the same mistake. It's funny. My parents were my first clients. And the reason I chose my parents is because I felt like I could kind of screw up and they wouldn't critique me as hard.
Okay.
But I would say, if you're asking for wisdom on where to start, I would encourage trainers to go out and train other trainers that have already been trained. And here's why. Your mom and dad will usually tell you what you want to hear because you're their son.
Okay.
Your spouse may not always be the best litmus test, for one reason or another. So if you screw up, it could have lifelong implications. But trainers are kind of, I don't know, they're a little ego driven and they're probably more open to give you criticism. The other thing to keep in mind is they may give you feedback based upon how they train. And so that could be good, it could be bad. But again, one of the tools that we highly advocate is the Kaizen 6. And that's a huge tool for retention. But Kaizen is it's a Japanese word for continuous self-improvement. And so it basically outlays 6 specific questions. Not only are you asking, how did I do and, how could I do better, but it's a very specific way of asking these questions. That way, when you train the trainer, right, and you learn some things, it also gives you very specific things to go and improve upon, because those specifics are really what you'll, use in your training career. right? Things that customers like, things that they don't like. And you want to have a pattern. You don't want to have just one instance. You want to have multiple examples and curate multiple pieces of feedback. That way you can kind of tell, okay, the majority rules type thing. The majority of people are constantly asking for this. The majority of people are constantly asking for that. And I think that helps to build confidence as a trainer, which we can talk about later, but I would say is just such an incredibly important ingredient in their ability to do well in this profession.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Training a bunch of different styles of trainers and just getting good, honest feedback, and then being able to handle that criticism too.
Which is something it's hard for a lot of people to deal with that criticism, but being able to use it constructively, not just as a personal attack, but just be able to go, okay, I get it. I'm hearing it. I'm listening, and I'm going to take that under advisement and make the changes that are necessary.
You talk about the one skill that'll help you in marriage. There you go. Look no further.
Right. I've fired my wife twice from training her. I've done it twice. Because I said,
you texted me. Like, hey,
I even texted Neil. I did. I was like,
you got any time to train Sherry?
I was like, you got to train Sherry. I did. I was like, I did. We had to sit down. I said, look, honey, I said, this is the issues I'm having. I texted Neil. I said, I'm going to leave the ball in your court. You can either go train with Neil or we can fix the issues that we have. And so we ended up just hashing out the issues that we had, and things have been good. But it's been interesting to see that transition from having to deal with that, but even just honestly, just having the ability to just say, okay, honey, I may have to fire you. I think just doing that once, I was like, oh my God, what's going to happen with this? When I actually did it the first time. So that was quite the learning experience.
Yeah, I've done it a little differently where I'll give my wife here's what you're going to do. And then here's what I'm going to do on my own. And you just do that on your own. So we'll work out together instead of me training her.
Well, what my wife does still to this day is I still have some people from 10 years ago when I was in a health club in California that I write workouts for remotely. So I use our sister company, PT on the Net, and I write workouts using PT on the Net. And whenever I write one, she says, CC me. And so she has a library. She's not in my PT on the Net. She's not a client.
Yeah.
But she has a library of workouts that I've written for a couple of ladies in particular. And she'll use those workouts.
That was perfect.
So I'm kind of training her, but I'm not. It's working out really well.
but like you had inferred earlier, we project our expectations on them. And I think the one thing that when you train a family member or even a really good friend is I think we get a little overzealous. And so we're like, no, you need to do this. We would never say that to a regular client.
No, you're right. In my case, since, we're on the wife training topic, does not understand why anybody would do exercise until it hurts or it's uncomfortable. She's like, why would you do that? That's dumb. And I do endurance events and so forth that can get pretty tiring and painful. And she's like, that's just dumb. I don't understand why people do that. You guys I don't get it. And so it's real easy with a significant other to push them a little harder. Now, if that was a client that said, I don't want to hurt, I don't want to do this, I don't want to work too hard or whatever, you respect it, you listen to it. Yeah. You ask for feedback. You make sure that you've turned the dials the right amount so that they enjoy the experience and they want to come back. It's a little harder to do that with family members.
Big time. I started out at 24-Hour Fitness, so I went through their education first. And then I also went into IFPA, Dr. Bell's Association. And what I found interesting, so those are typically like we had talked about, just generic, this is your 3 your segments that you go through. And so when you guys are teaching or training coaches, new coaches, you take a much more 3D approach, correct, on how to work out?
Absolutely. When we were formed, we were formed by, it was over 20. I think we've kind of said 22, 24, depending on level of involvement but over 20 professionals in the industry who lived and breathed their specialty. Mm-hmm. And they did it for a living. It wasn't just teaching it in theory. And one of those people was Gary Gray. Mm-hmm. And so from the Gray Institute, we adopted what is called the 3-dimensional checkpoints and adapted it over the years to be more in line with what we teach in movement style. And it's something that we can teach, for example, in a workshop in 30 minutes, an hour, rather than the level of detail that Gary's capable of doing and does do. But that's what it's all about, is three-dimensional movement and making small tweaks. And, we've all heard it, making 100 exercises out of one exercise. And it's not just for the enjoyment factor, because some people don't want to do 3 sets of the same thing, but that's how we move. We move in 3 planes. We move in completely unpredictable patterns. If you watch somebody do something, if you watch me pick up stuff around my yard, and you saw me do that exact same movement in a gym, you'd yell at me and say I was using bad form. But that's how we actually move. So understanding that, obviously doing things safely, decreasing load, be careful about the sphere of movement based on that person, but moving in unpredictable patterns and a large variety of patterns is actually helping that person for the sport of life rather than the sport of doing a squat. And most people are there because they want a better life. They want to be able to move better and do things better, not to be able to squat more. That's a very small percentage of the people that we're training. That's my input. Izzy, you want to add to that?
Yeah, just briefly. I think the other component when we think about 3 dimensions, you've got your sagittal, your frontal, and your transverse, but we talk a lot about training the human being, not just the human body. I think trainers really hyper focus on the human body piece, right? Like joints and angles and compound motions and performance and acute variables. And at the end of the day, we're training human beings. And so if they don't like any of that stuff and they stop coming to the sessions, well, guess what? You don't get to use any of that fancy science and program design.
Yeah.
And so a big part of what we talk about is the mental and emotional, and motivation is an art. It's absolutely an art form. And you're not just going to high five your way to success as a personal trainer. And so I think trainers that understand the deep nature of science, I always say if my background hadn't been in performance enhancement and kinesiology, I would have been in psychology, because I love the way that people think and why our customers and clients choose the things that they do, why they struggle with the things they do, and then being able to put all that together and figure out a plan that truly gets them motivated long-term to, yes, come into the sessions, they can follow the plan, but outside of that, to really enjoy the things that they're doing and become empowered in that process, to want to take ownership in the plan, take ownership in the program. And again, that's an art. And so you look at our courses like behavior change and exercise, you look at, some of the undertones in our CPT, our fast track. We talk a lot about, how motivation is an art form and how trainers can add that skill set through using our tools, using our systems. But I'll just say that for me is one of a handful of skill sets. If I had to package and say, okay, this is 1, 2, or 3 things that you have to be successful as a personal trainer. The ones that figure it out, they're the 1% that outlast their 10, 20, 30-year veteran trainers. They're making great money, but that's, those aren't good odds in Vegas.
Yeah, no.
They're not good odds in the industry, but the other 99% of us, it's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of aches and pains. And so, man, if we can just teach trainers that art form, how to motivate and empower clients from the get-go, and then continually do that, it's a game changer, man. It's a game changer for their business. It's a game changer in how they see their worth and value in the client's life, because they start to see clients light up and they start to see the impact and the difference that they have the potential.
Yeah, I think that's great, because I think it, that comes from being able to meet your client at their specific level. Yeah. Right. And give them the progression or whatever it is that they need, so that when they leave that session, they get a little win and they go home and they do something that they weren't able to do. And then they feel this success. And then once they feel that, that's when that intrinsic motivation comes. It comes from the successes that they achieve by themselves. So.
Absolutely. And tie that into what matters to them. So we use this example a lot, but it's a real one. Especially as you get older, like myself, be able to do the things with your kids you want to do. Here you are in the gym doing one thing, and then you go home and you do something with your kids that you want to be able to do for the next 10, 20, 30 years. That's what it's about. And that's really what's important to them. It's not you. It's not the dumbbells and the cables or the clean gym. It's outside those 4 walls. And if what you're doing inside the 4 walls makes the life better on the outside of the 4 walls of that thing that's most important to them, they're going to keep coming back.
So is it hypocritical for, and I think we see this a lot in the industry, for trainers and coaches bashing on other systems and other modalities, but yet also criticizing the general population for being lazy and not getting off the couch and actually doing something. So you're sending a conflicting message to the average person.
Yeah, I would say there's a couple pieces to that. One, yes, it is hypocritical. So I just finished working through a book by Carol Dweck called Mindset. And it talks about the fixed versus the growth mindset. And I think a lot of trainers are very fixed in the way that they do things. That can be really polarizing. I would say the more confident you get as a trainer, the more successful, tenured, seasoned, the more open-minded you are. That there is no one way to do anything. You're always open to different methodologies and systems because there's multiple ways to get to the goal. But I think that's a lot of a confidence thing. Sometimes when you're not as confident, you only know this one thing and that's the way that you know how to win, then you can kind of polarize other methodologies. And to your point, like if you start becoming hypercritical of certain dietary habits or certain, methodologies that people are using as opposed to becoming empathetic, which I think is also a maturity thing too, right? Like, I don't know that I had great empathy at 20. I think I was wired a little different. I think my belief system, my faith, it helped a lot of that because I love people first and fitness second. So I think that helped with some of that. But still, as a 20 something, you're just not well-rounded in your ability to truly understand the struggle that people go through and have good perspective. So I think that's something that you get with age if you allow yourself that. And then I think you start becoming less hypocritical of other people and more servant-minded. How can I help? How can I better understand? So again, my 2 cents, Dan's got, he could write the book on this topic. So
no. Few things were going through my mind when you asked the question, Dennis, and Israel nailed it. I 100% agree that it comes with maturity in the industry and confidence in yourself. Okay. I think ability, of course, is the word we look for often, but it's confidence in yourself and respecting and understanding that there's so much out there we don't know. I'm going to tie it back into law enforcement. It's going to sound a little crazy, but the first time I heard something like this was when I was going through my own academy and I was taught a certain way to handcuff people. And somebody raised their hand and asked the guy in charge, the training officer, is this the only way that we should handcuff? And that training officer said, if there are 1,000 ways to handcuff, learn all 1,000 ways to handcuff. This is what I'm going to teach you today. This is what you're going to become confident in, but never stop learning. And I love that because the more you know, the more you grow. I don't believe there's any bad movement. There's a poorly prescribed movement. The person may not like it, or it may be outside their bubble of ability, their pre-existing condition, et cetera. But all movement is good. We just have to move. And I definitely personally evolved because I was the old Arnold Schwarzenegger, encyclopedia of modern bodybuilding dude, Muscle Mag, Muscle and Fitness. I had them all. And that's how I learned originally as a youngster. And when I started seeing new technologies and new tools, I'm like, all you need is a bar and a dumbbell and a preacher curl on your set, man. And now it's, I have to, if I turn my camera around, you'd see a batch of training equipment that's absolutely all kinds of stuff that 20 years ago, I'd be like, what do you want a Cortex for? A Power Plate or a Viper, or a Rip Trainer? It's all good stuff. And, learn how to use as much as you can. I love what Israel said about, training other trainers. That was something we did at the clubs I managed. That was part of our monthly thing is you had to work out with another trainer, not only to find out what you're doing well and can improve on, but to learn what they know, because we get so caught up in only what we know. And then they do something or use a tool or use it in a different way, do something. You're like, wow, I've been working right alongside you for 5 years and I never realized that. So always be learning. I don't believe in poo-pooing anything anymore. I mean, nothing. So definitely be confident enough to try anything out there that's, backed by some science and a reputation and so forth, but that the client enjoys and is within their sphere of ability.
So Israel, if I'm just if I'm a listener, a general population, and I'm thinking about hiring a trainer, would you advise me to look for someone who's a little older or on that younger spectrum? Or is that just based mostly off of what I'm trying to accomplish?
Yeah, it's hard because it's said that it's kind of a young man's industry. Most of the trainers that get out of college or are trying to figure out what they want to do after high school and try a couple of odd jobs. And then they, kind of stumble into training, or they have gotten fit themselves. And so now they're like, well, I want to, share this gift with others. And so I would say majority are kind of, it's a young man's game. So it's hard to say, well, I only want to hire this specific age. I think the way that I always approached it at the club level and then even multi-unit level is you need a good array of different age ranges, different skill sets, different specializations, because there's gonna be a target market or target client that, is gonna gravitate towards that person. So I prided myself on having, a trainer that was above 50, right? Because I knew that a lot of my members would gravitate towards that person just because like attracts like, right? I want to train someone that understands me, understands the struggle, right? Struggle's real. Then I wanted to hire a good blend of male and female trainers that also had and knew. That's the important piece. Had and knew what their strengths were. A lot of trainers have strengths, but leadership is identifying those strengths with them and then pointing them out, then pointing them in the right direction of those strengths. And so I tried to curate that at the club level and then advocate that multi-unit to be able to ensure that we would always have a good mix of trainers, because we knew that we had a vast mix of members.
It's giving people, the listeners out there, possibilities and things that they maybe not are thinking of. And that's the big thing there. So if I'm a trainer on the other side and I'm just new to the industry, or relatively new speaking, Israel, would you say that would you recommend me being more of a specialist or more of a generalist in the industry?
Again, if you're asking my advice, I would say come into it with an open mind and being a generalist, because you don't know what you don't know yet, and you haven't earned the right to be niche. So in other words, like when you're coming in, you're trying to find a way to make a living. And if you only want to work with specific youth, well, then you better be a mastermind in marketing and SEO and all website design. And if you are, and you can stay in that groove from day one, great. But most trainers need to start with a generalization. And the next thing you know, they'll fall in love with certain age ranges or demographics that they didn't even know that they enjoyed working, because they've had exposure of working with that type of people. For me, it was correct. I didn't plan on that, but I started as a generalist thinking I just want to help people lose weight and maybe I want to work with you. But what I found was I kind of liked fixing broke people. I just did. And so I got my master's in that. And my claim to fame was I was the guy that, they would send people to that no other trainer wanted to take on. And that just kind of became my thing as a trainer, is corrective exercise specialization and performance enhancement type stuff. And I don't know what it was, but I liked that crap. And coincidentally, 80% of the members that came in the gym had something going on, a knee issue, low back issue, shoulder issue. And so guess what? They were like, who we got to send you to?
Yeah.
Right. And it just kind of became my thing, but it didn't happen day one. It happened over trial and error. It happened with lots of education and double downing and triple downing into that craft and specialization. So it wasn't just something that I wanted to do, that I was interested in. It was something that I was very effective at doing. And I actually was kind of the expert in it. But it took probably 5 to 7 years to where I could say, like, I could go toe to toe in this specific, craft, So again, I would probably start general and then get really specific from it.
So that general gives you that nice solid base.
That's right.
That's kind of what people have said. You should be able to train pretty much anybody that walks into a gym. But then later on, if you want to get really specialized, then go ahead and do that. Dan, we'll start with you on this one, because we asked Mike Demora, we had him on from NCEP. Would you support a national board approval for trainers to take, or a testing?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I need to understand better what you mean, because when you say board or standardized testing, that is what we do with the NCCA, right? It's a standardized process that any NCCA accredited organization needs to go through. It's very laborious. It's very expensive. It's rooted in mathematics and psychometrics, really. And so forth. So what do you mean something regulated by government, something like reps?
Pretty much like, I got to take the bar exam if I'm a lawyer. I've got to be able to pass the medical exam if I want to be a doctor or a nurse. So same thing with our industry. Is that something that no matter who you learn from, should there be a standardized test that everyone has to take and pass to be in this industry?
Okay. This is personal answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
it's not PTA Global stance.
No, that's
Two things. First of all, when we talk about board, or in other words, government, I think that often opens a can of worms. And the unfortunate thing with government, and I'm not definitely hope I'm not coming across a conspiracy theorist or anything, but I worked for the government for 22 years.
Okay.
And there's lobbies, there's folks that have more influence that tend to be more successful. Israel and I had a conversation this morning about foods and wheat and corn and soy, et cetera. And there's a reason why those industries are so massive. They have a huge lobby. And so, that's, I think, that the touchy part anytime government is involved. Done correctly, I don't think it's a bad idea. But I want to add to that, because I'm going to give an example of what I believe would be wonderful. And that is if we had a process more like what, for example, EREPS or Europe Active utilizes, where there's mandatory in-person training and there's a mandatory in-person assessment. So I take and not only go through the online education. So our partners that are EREPS accredited go through the online course that we have, the certification course. Then they do 6 days in a classroom that's hands-on. And so there's breakouts and activities and so forth. So you're applying what you learn. There's a 70-page learning achievement portfolio that fill out where you find a role player. And that person, you take them through a program design questionnaire or PDQ or interview. You take them through interview, a nutrition interview, assessment, body fat, all those things, flexibility, so forth, like a lot of clubs do. You take them through all of that, and then you build programs for them, 3 different phases: sensory, motor, force, and power. And step by step with this client, all the way to now you show up with that role player. There's a assessor. It's the 2 of you and an assessor. And you treat that person as a client. You greet them, you shake their hand, you provide them a towel. You ask them the questions about injuries, how you feeling today, the DROs, what we use, daily readiness observation. Take them. And then at that point, the assessor says, do the force workout. So it's unpredictable. You have to deliver a workout. You have to deliver it safely, adjust equipment properly, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a pass or fail. Then you take the final exam, the written exam. So I love that model. I liken it to an orthopedic surgeon. I wouldn't want somebody operating on my knee who has never seen a cadaver, has never, done any type of internship. They've just read the books. It sounds a little bit rough because that's how we do things in the United States. But that would be my personal opinion, is I think we need more hands-on and we need a assessment in person. I always look at it this way, and it's been this way since I started in the private personal training industry. Would I let that person train my mother?
Exactly. Yes.
And that's, you don't always like the answer to that one.
Yes. I think we believe in that big time. I've always said, for me, I look at a trainer and I say, would I let them train my mom, my dad, my wife? And that says a lot. That's a huge validation. Israel.
That's my 2 cents.
Yeah. So I'll kind of bolt onto that. One, the short answer is, the minimum would be NCCA accreditation. You got a lot of Insta trainers out there that aren't certified, that are, making a couple bucks here and there. And candidly, they're giving the rest of the industry a bad name. The ones that have put sweat equity in, the ones that have sat down and taken the test and made the investment. And it's disheartening. It's discouraging. In order for us to rebuild after COVID, we're going to have to do something pretty bold. Dan and I have had this conversation a couple of years ago. So when you talk about, okay, what's the next level? NCCA accreditation to kind of CYA for the gym business to make sure that, okay, trainers can at least come in, and if something happens in the process, someone gets hurt, at least you can fall back on, well, here's their credentials and this, that, or the other. And that's, obviously a strategy to prevent against liability, even though we're a very litigious industry. The next phase that I see about this, we talk about, okay, how do we deepen our value, and how do you get to that next level? Where I think what you're talking about, like a national exam above an NCCA accreditation. And I think you're going to have people from multiple industries, people from the medical community, people from the insurance community, people, registered dietitians. You're going to have some some, multiple industry experts that come in and sit at this board and develop this as far as subject matter experts. And that board would be a way to, I would say, separate the gap from clients having to pay versus insurance backing that.
Oh,
And that's, that can be a huge strategy for us to become, back on the mend as a fitness industry, right? Back on the mend economically. It's a win-win for insurance companies because if people can actually get fit, they're a lot less likely to spend, the tens of thousands of dollars that they're spending per average on, type 2 diabetes right now per year on surgeries and all kinds of stuff. So it's kind of like spend to save type deal. And so you're benefiting that economically, but there would have to be some very, specific standards of excellence to get to that level to where now you're going to, accept insurance reimbursement. The other thing that I could see beneficially for that is it'll bridge the gap right now in this whole Biggie Tupac East Coast, West Coast between the medical and the fitness community.
Right.
You know what I'm talking
Right. Oh, yeah.
Therapists do not want to recommend to your Joe Schmo trainer because my Joe Schmo trainer is just going to undo all the great work that I've done.
Right.
But if I know that Joe Schmo trainer has this specific credential, this specific accreditation that is backed by the physical therapy community, the medical community, insurance companies, all of this stuff, then now it creates this free flow of referrals and networking and trust. And that gap is what we need to get to the next step of evolution, I would say, in how do we best serve, right, the 7.5 billion people across the world that need our help in fitness and health and everything else. Like that's how we take it to the next level. So hopefully someone from the government or Congress is listening to this and I'll collect my royalties later.
Yeah, that's a fantastic idea right there.
Tupac, by the way.
Yeah.
But Israel, you're right though. I mean, we've got the training world bashing on the clinicians, and the clinicians are calling the training world idiots. So you get this back and forth. But I've always recommended, especially to new trainers and coaches, to have the confidence to be able to train a clinician, even if it's free, just to get that clinician to trust you, right?
Huge.
And then you get this clinician that's like, okay, I know what he or she brings to the table, and now I'm willing to refer my patients out to this person. But you got to have the confidence to be able to go up and do this. And that's the thing that a lot of people are like, I don't want to put myself out there, but you have to. It's one of the only ways that you're really going to help succeed. So, I mean, I think right down the street from where we're at, there we have National Avenue, which is just all medical people. And I tell coaches in the area, I'm like, take your ass down that street, and I don't care, knock on every freaking door, but get somebody on. And so that's where it starts, is just having that confidence to be able to put yourself out there and say, hi, my name is, and start the conversation.
We built our personal practices by these referrals from doctors, chiropractors, physical therapists. So it's an endless referral base right there.
Brilliant idea. And we happen to have that in our education. So Justin Price has an entire section on referrals. Yeah. And it's professional referrals, not ask your client for a referral. It's exactly what you two are talking about. You nailed it. Absolutely.
Because you're not spinning your wheels, throwing money out the window, or burning money essentially with all the marketing stuff out there that may or may not pay off for you. So your ROI could be, and anybody's just, if you saw somebody walking down the street just throwing money out the window, you'd be like, you're an idiot. But yet we see coaches doing the same thing, running ads, and they're just spending all that money, and they're not getting anything back in return for it. So that's another facet of why PTA Global, for people out there, new coaches, new trainers that are thinking about gaining a really good support system behind them. That's another reason why PTA Global is one of those organizations that you really, frankly, should be looking into if you haven't already. So, well, gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. You've brought some really good concepts and some ideas out that hopefully the listeners are tuned into. We always want to bring new ideas, fresh concepts, thinking outside that box, eliminating that box, and just be free flowing, and let that creativity start to and adaptation and the ability to improvise and get around obstacles. So thank you very much. So, and we look forward to hopefully down the road having some PTA Global / Stick Mobility events. That's something we've been in the talks with. So to our listeners out there, keep an eye out for that. So we're hopefully getting something up and running on that end. So that way we get both companies presenting some great stuff. Dan, go ahead.
Two things.
Yeah.
Number one, let me start with this. We had discussion about where does the trainer start? Should it be general or specialized? Mm-hmm. And then how do they choose a specialty, et cetera? But we were still talking about specializing in training or human movement, right? Mm-hmm. Performance, corrective, fat loss, et cetera. So for the listeners out there, remember, there are a lot of pathways to go, and you're seeing it right now or hearing it right now with Neil and Dennis, for example. What is that pathway? It's entrepreneurship. It's the creation of a product and programming. It's education. So there are a lot of ways to go when you enter into this industry. What about myself personally? Education. I'm passionate about education. Mm-hmm. I think Israel would feel the same way. Education and helping others to become successful at something that is still needs, there's still room for improvement for all of us. Mm-hmm. So we're not limited to specializing in movement. We can become instructors. We can become collegiate type, teach at a college, junior college, four-year college. We can promote into management like Israel did and oversee, hundreds of locations and thousands of people. So don't limit yourself on what your opportunities are. Just look at the people that you're listening to, or right now, as an example. And Dennis and Neil are shining examples of taking that passion, taking that education, and then turning it into something that's going to help all of us move better, feel better. And that's through stepping outside the box, taking chances, becoming an entrepreneur, backing it up with solid education, and then embracing all the others in the industry, not just saying, I have the solution. And you're shining examples of what it should be to evolve in this industry.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Appreciate that. So thank you again. And we look forward to having you gentlemen on again. We just wanted to introduce you to the people, to our listeners who may or may not know what PTA Global is. And next time we have you on, we're going to get much more specific into much more specific topics. So we will look forward to doing that down the road. Until next episode, be good to each other.